So yeah, this is the Calico community meeting for, what's today, February 10th, 2021. I guess we're going to kick it off with some discussion of upcoming releases and other check-ins. So I can start that with a quick update on Calico 3.18. So that's coming right up around the corner. We're currently planning to release that in the next week and a half or so. We're in the middle of testing and bug fix for that. So the main areas of work there for 3.18 were some service advertisement features that went in a little ways back that allow you to advertise load balancer IP addresses, as well as some controls to help restrict which nodes actually advertise service addresses in case you don't want service traffic going through your control plane nodes, for example. I believe we also will have support for host endpoint policy in the eBPF data plane, which is very exciting. And a few additional IPAM capabilities, mostly around monitoring. So we've got a few new Prometheus metrics that are exported by Calico that'll help monitor the state of IPAM, which I will be demoing a little bit later in the meeting, as well as a couple new Calico Cuddle features to help generate a report of IPAM state and help with reconciliation of that if something looks off. And then I think we also have our first publicly accessible Helm chart planned to be released with this release, which is also very exciting. I know people have wanted for a long time. We've been using it within our docs site. Helm is a templating engine for a while now, but it hasn't really been consumable by users. So there should be an actual official release for that. I think that's it for 3.18. Did I miss anything? Sounds like not. Eric, why don't you talk about operator stuff? I need to take this call really quickly because it's
Okay.
a delivery.
All right. I was actually going to say that there is actually some stuff that I was going to talk about for operator that is 3.18 things. So the operator for 3.18 will be the 115 series. So that's that. And it's got several new features. One of them is per node certificate capabilities. Uh, it'll be possible to configure. Let's see, actually, off the top of my head, I don't remember how that's configured. Um, is it in the installation resource? I believe maybe so, but it will use the Kubernetes certificate signing requests, um, and so images that need the certificates will issue one of those certificate signing requests. So it's expected that you would need to have something that is a controller that's handling those and signing them. So instead of needing to provide those certificates directly, it'll be possible to use the CSR um, capability of Kubernetes. And I think there is a default controller that can be enabled for that. but you can also write your own. So that's, let's see, I guess I should write this down.
Yeah, sorry, it's tough being a presenter and a note taker. I'll try to take over notes for you while you're doing that.
Casey, do you remember on the certificate thing, where's that configured? Is that in the installation resource?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. Next thing is, well, there's a new resource called image set, and it is specifically for providing um, uh, being able to specify the images the operator will use by the reg registry digest hash. So there's been some requests to be able to deploy images using the hash from a registry, so that it's a very specific image. You can't even update the tag to change it. Um, so there's this new image set resource that can be done with. Um, so that's we had added in something a while back to, or had tried to to just build in those digests, but we found that those digests aren't consistent across registries. So we're like, well, we took that out, and this is the adding it back to be able to specify those image hashes. Um, there's another few changes around controlling where Typha and kube controllers can run. We've added um, uh, capability to configure tolerations, so that if like you wanted to have kube controllers run on some specific nodes that had taints that wouldn't allow it normally, um, that is there. It actually doesn't apply to Typha, because Typha actually can run anywhere already. Um, Also, though, what we added for Typha is an affinity, um, to be able to configure affinity for it. It only allows the preferred scheduling, so that even if the affinity can't be satisfied, Typha will still get deployed. Um, so that's available now too. So you can push Typha towards nodes, but it will always run. Um, so I think that was the set of things for 318 that will be in the operator for Calico 318. Um, there is some other slightly related stuff, more development stuff that uh, got fixed, well, made it much easier to generate the API operator API documentation for the docs. Um, since the enterprise resources are in the operator repo, we would have to we would clean those out for the Calico release, and now we have a make target that and a config that just generates exactly what the Calico docs need. So that's a nice uh, improvement for those that have to generate those. Um, yeah. Also, I wanted to mention that the operator, this is more devy type thing also, the operator images the tagging, when the repo is tagged, they will can automatically be pushed, and that was broken for a little bit, but that has gotten fixed, uh, and so that's just a little update there that we've corrected that. I don't know that it affects anybody that doesn't already know about it, but just thought we'd mention it here. I think that's all I had.
It affects me, and I didn't already know about it, so that's
Oh, okay.
exciting.
All right, cool.
I know that I had hit some sort of issue there for a while and was always in too much of a rush to dig into it, so I'm glad it's fixed. Do you know, I think we're still using manual updates to our like the Project Calico.org/v3 APIs. Would that automation stuff that you're doing for the operator API apply to those as well? Could we leverage that to make that a bit easier?
I don't actually know. Do we? I guess it
Just
might.
thinking like stuff like BGP peers and network policies and network sets and all that.
I mean, I would imagine that you could. We might have to like rearrange it to get it in the format at once.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'd probably know better than me, Casey. You're the one that originally set up the
Well, I don't
generator.
know where it's gone since then.
Well, it hasn't changed that much.
Okay. Yeah, that would be a good thing to look into, because
Yeah.
I know we've had issues with that in the past where they don't get updated promptly.
Yeah. On that generation stuff, it actually is good that we're now using have a config in with the docs, because it allows us to also like change the Kubernetes API reference, like which, if it's pointing at 118 version reference or 119 or stuff like that, where before it was using a default config. So now that's local to the docs.
So I think before I had to let that delivery person into the building, there were a couple other releases I wanted to talk about. So we did a handful of patch releases over the last week. I think it has 3.15.4 listed here. There was also a 3.16.7 and a 3.17.2, if I remember all those numbers correctly. So I think 3.17.2 was mostly just a code rebuild and pull in some CVE fixes in downstream packages that we use. And then all three also included some fixes for, I think those were the fixes for upgrade when using the IPAM migration tool. So if you're upgrading from host local to Calico IPAM, but I should double check that.
Casey, does that include that patch that we exchanged some
That
comments on?
doesn't include that patch, so that's another one that I think we need to get patch releases out for.
Okay.
But oh, you know what? I am totally wrong. So I was mixing up two migration issues. This fixes one, not in the IPAM migration code, rather in the etcd to KDD migration code,
Okay.
where we were not properly migrating some namespace resources. So that should be in all three of those patch releases. And yeah, like you said, we'll need to do another one to fix that IPAM migration issue, but that's been merged now, and I think backported at least to 3.17. So we're in a good place to do that.
Wait, what'd you say about 3.17? The one Steve was talking about?
I was just saying that it's been backported at this point, so it will be in the next 3.17 patch release.
Are those patch releases made when enough changes accumulate, or are they on a particular schedule? What we know we can expect a new image for that?
Yeah, it's more the former. So it's when we have enough or sufficiently critical bug fixes that have accumulated in those branches. So yeah, more of a more of a judgment call. I think that that one is probably worth us just doing a release of anyway, but I want to give it a little bit of time just to accumulate a couple more if there are those coming.
I'll say this just as one interested party. I could put it to profitable use probably mid next week, early to mid next week, if we have it. If not, there'll be some more suffering for me, not for you.
Well,
so you'll hear me
suffering
complaining.
is my suffering. Yeah, let me see what we can do there. I know that the fix will also be in 3.18, which is in a similar time frame, and sort of complicates it because most of our resources are put on 3.18 at the moment, getting that really solid and ready for release. But let me see what we can do. So I think that was all that I had on release stuff. Alois or Nathan, do you want to talk about the latest or greatest in VPP?
Sure.
And greatest.
First, before going into Calico VPP, there was a talk last Sunday was. So thanks, Casey and Casey and Alois spoke about Calico VPP and presented the latest results. Most importantly about WireGuard improvements and the whole architecture. So quite a nice attendance from what I recall. It was nice. And we did release the 0.12 version of Calico VPP with some new features, so auto MTU support. We also integrated interrupt mode, so instead of defaulting, so improved interrupt mode. So we don't default anymore to pull mode drivers and to busy loops. When we are idle, we sleep to allow for. So with keeping the speed, we consume less CPUs. And most importantly, we now have full support for the policies. We should be passing all test cases. That means that we should, with fingers crossed, be fully compatible with the expectations, at least from the test. And so we've been working on a small draft doc PR that we've opened a couple days ago to just highlight the how to install it. And the next steps, we will be looking at maybe integrating with operator if that can be done, and also we're looking at load balancing improvements, namely maglev, and how we could add HA features with this into the services. And that's pretty much it.
Pretty much it. That's a lot of stuff. I saw the draft docs PR go up. I still need to give that a deeper look, and hoping to get a couple other eyes on it from our side as well.
Thanks.
That sort of stuff. But
hey Nathan, did you say that talk is up somewhere? If you have a link to it, could you add that?
Yeah, sure. It's a PR, and I think.
Oh, I was actually referring to the talk. Or actually,
oh, to the talk.
I guess
yeah.
you should probably have that, shouldn't you? If you got the talk.
I probably should.
I think it's not up yet, but so it will be published on YouTube in a couple days, but we can add it later.
Okay, cool. All right,
Yeah,
cool,
those things usually take a little bit of time to get public.
Sure.
Are there other things? I think that's all that I had. Any other check-ins or news that that we should be talking about, or would like to be talking about? I am unprepared and don't have any hot issues to speak about, but I would be happy to.
One I wanted to ask about, which probably involves Sean. Sean, you there? Sean is here. There's that one about eBPF mode and DNS in Kubernetes. Has something to do with the contract, connection tracking. Is this sounding familiar?
Is it eBPF mode specific, that one? So Kubernetes has a new optional component called the DNS, like node local DNS cache, and it does some crazy stuff in IP tables. It uses no track rules and intercepts packets and redirects them to a proxy and things like that. And that messes with Calico policy because Calico policy is based on connection tracking. So if you disable the connection tracking, then you can have problems. So I'm not sure exactly what the incompatibility is, like exactly what scenarios it affects. But for now, if you have policy and you're using the node local DNS cache, you may have trouble with that. I suspect it was host endpoint policy that was the problem here.
Okay.
Yeah, I would hope that their rules are pretty specific and are only.
So that I think what happens is the traffic can hit the sort of contract invalid rule because it doesn't have an active contract entry. So yeah, I'm not totally sure exactly what it does.
But is it the case that if you don't use network policy, that you think you'd be clear of this problem?
Certainly, if you don't use the node local DNS cache, you'll be clear of the problem.
Right. Yeah.
And if you do use that, I think people were reporting that it was only a problem once you added policy. And I think they were using global network policy with host endpoints. So it's not clear exactly where the incompatibility was without digging in the next level of detail.
Okay. If I understood it right, you were waiting on more feedback from some of the Kubernetes maintainers. Was that right?
So they responded and asked for pretty much the information I said we needed next, which was the next level of detail on which flows are impacted. So I haven't reprod this myself, but hoping to get more information from the users who are hitting it. It's also possible that there may be a workaround with different, if they use different Calico policy, it may be okay. So Calico supports untracked policy as well, and it may be that if they switch to untracked policy for their DNS traffic, where the DNS cache is already marking it as untracked, then it may be compatible after they do that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we were considering activating the node local DNS cache. We had some feedback recently from GKE support staff advocating us to turn it on for our clusters there. But I recommended we hold off until we figure out what's going on with this Calico, this incompatibility.
So I had a Calico hero nomination, although it's really more of a dual hero villain nomination. I wanted to nominate Turk for a bunch of operator release fixing stuff that he worked on, getting that all sorted out, which is a huge quality of life improvement. And I wanted to nominate Eric as his arch nemesis and villain for originally breaking it. I really see Turk and Eric as heroes and arch nemesis villains pretty much all the time. Not sure, Turk, if you see yourself as more of a Batman or a Spider-Man, but
I'm just trying to remember what fix this is for.
It was the Git version.
Oh yeah, that was my bug that I introduced. I'm
Yeah.
both the villain and the hero in this story.
oh,
Yeah.
well, that complicates things,
Well,
doesn't it?
you fixed it, and then I broke it again, and then I fixed it again. So we're battling ourselves, I think.
Yeah, we're gonna need a sequel. I'm not sure if we can fit this into one movie.
Well, maybe neither of you deserve to be heroes then, but it's out there at this point. Any other nominations? If not, then I am excited to show you guys some IPAM metric stuff.
Let's see it.
Okay, gotta share my screen. Cool. Can you guys all see this pretty colorful Prometheus page? Cool. So this is just a quick demo. Some of the stuff that we've been doing around IPAM in 3.18 should be coming out next week. So I've got this just local Kubernetes and Docker cluster running here with latest master Calico installed. This is a 3.18 release candidate. And so main thing we've added here is in Keyed controllers, there's now this Prometheus metrics port configuration that you can set. So if this is non-zero, it'll enable exporting of some new metrics. And those are really just a couple simple ones. So we've had this IPAM allocations per node. So you can track, if you look at this in table form, you can see what node is exporting the metric, and
Can you make that a little bigger, Casey?
that's a fair question. How's
Thank
that?
So is that a counter or a gauge?
This is a gauge.
Okay, so it's tracking how many allocations are outstanding right now, right?
That's right, yeah. So you can see if I, so I've got this Nginx deployment ready right now with no replicas, but I can scale that up to say 10 replicas. And we'll see those pop up and get IP addresses. and we'll see that number increases accordingly. Let's see on the kind of graph view, those are going up as well. The other one that we've got here is blocks per node, which if you're familiar with how Calico's IPAM model works, it assigns these blocks out per node in order to help aggregate addresses. So, for now, we see we're not really running that many pods, so each node just has a single block. If I were to scale this up to, some number where greater than 64 pods were running on each node, they would need to start allocating new blocks, and we'd see this change. And the third metric is borrowed per node. So there are scenarios where, as exceptions to the rule, addresses will be borrowed from another node's block, and they will show up here. The sort of easiest way to show that is to delete the default IP pool. So when you do this, it no longer wants to allocate addresses from blocks within this pool, and so as a result, it's going to release the affinities for those blocks, and those addresses are going to be, in a sense, borrowed from non-affine blocks, so blocks that no longer belong to a node. So the first thing you'll see is that deleting the IP pool removes the address that each node has for its tunnel, because we no longer have our VXLAN configuration in place. So that's the step down that happens here. You'll notice here that we get this new IPAM blocks, which show blocks that have no affinity, which is all of them. One of those blocks was deleted for the control plane node because there were no longer any addresses in it after the releasing of its tunnel address. And then you'll see that all of our pod addresses are now considered to be borrowed. So you can see each of the worker nodes that's running those Nginx pods have borrowed addresses on them.
So their networking continues to function correctly, right?
That's right. Well, with the exception of the fact that I just deleted the VXLAN configuration. So if they need VXLAN to function, then they won't be functioning at the moment.
Ah, okay. So any traffic that would have been encapsulated then
will now be unencapsulated.
Yeah, I just wanted to say we in no way would suggest you deleting your IP pool.
Oh yeah, that's just for demonstration purposes, to show how some of these metrics change.
But if you were to create a new IP pool that included with blocks that included those
Don't
existing.
get any ideas, Steve. Don't get any ideas.
Yeah, this was a dangerous thing that I did. So if I delete all of the pods in the cluster now, a few things are going to happen. One, a bunch of addresses that were allocated to some of those pods are going to be released, and new addresses will be given out. Deleting these Calico node pods is going to result in an IP pool being created again, because they're going to spot that it's not there. So we'll see that as that pool is created, our the VXLAN tunnel address that was removed comes back, which is why these all tick up by 1. We'll see that we no longer have blocks with no affinity because those blocks, the nodes are now able to claim a block from the IP pool, and we released all the addresses that were previously in these kind of orphaned blocks. And similarly here, the number of borrowed allocations goes back to 0. So that's sort of the main thing I wanted to show. There are a couple other things that we've done in the area of IPAM. So there's a new Calico cuddle command that mostly Sean worked on, but I did a little bit towards the end to add a little bit too, called check, which will do a basic consistency check on the IPAM state, so comparing that against things like pods in the cluster and nodes in the cluster. So you can see here it gives you a little bit of a summary about that and a high level view of whether there are any problems. Since I also passed this report flag, it gives you a machine readable report of all of those allocations in the cluster. So you can see all the addresses that are in use, who they're in use by. You know, for pod addresses, it gives you the pod, the namespace, the node that they're running on, the time that the address was allocated, whether or not it's currently in use, and a list of things in the cluster that think they own that address. So each of these are just assigned to a workload. You can also see the VXLAN tunnel addresses here, which node they're on, etc.
Hey, Casey, I have a couple questions about that tool.
Mhm.
You said that's in 118, is that right?
318, yeah.
Sorry, 318. And then if, say, I had a 3.6 cluster running 316, could I run that? Could I grab the Calico Cuddle 318 binary and run it against it, or?
I would expect that to work. I think that it will be missing some things. So the creation timestamp is one bit of metadata that earlier clusters won't have stored for it. But you know, the high level logic should apply to older clusters as well.
Okay. And will that pick up the IP and IP tunnel addresses as well?
It will, yeah.
Okay.
I'd have to double check exactly which release it would support, but I would expect it to work on something like 316.
Okay.
Might not for like 310 or 311.
Okay. Yeah, I know we have some couple-year-old clusters that have tens of thousands or at least thousands of IPs that are lead that we're running out of blocks. So this will be a good start to looking at those.
Yeah, I know like these bits of metadata were added in relatively recent releases.
Okay.
But even without that, I suspect that this sort of stuff would show up.
Well, even that high level check that you showed before will be helpful. So, all right. And then just to mention the other big one, we actually wrote a tool to kind of try and clean up leaked IPs. But then we found out even if you clear out a whole block, the block stays assigned to a worker, right? So no new worker can come and take that, right? It would have to borrow from it. Is that something maybe in the future we could look at?
Yeah, so I've got that one on my list to look at. Okay. So you're right. The behavior today is that even when a block is empty, it'll stay around until it is no longer affine to a node. Yep. So until that binding is broken. And there are really two ways of doing that. One is deleting the node and having cube controllers detect that and clean it up. Or the thing that I would not recommend doing, which I did in this demo, which is to delete the IP pool containing the block.
Yeah.
And that will release its affinity, like you can see here.
Okay.
But yeah, I've definitely got that on my list of areas that we could improve. One thing that I don't really have a good way to demo here, but this report, if you look at it, it has this field in use, which is whether or not we've been able to find an actual resource in the cluster that's using the allocation.
Yep.
And we did add a new capability to IPAM release, where you can pass this from report option.
Oh.
So that will find all of those, anything in here that has, I'm just going to hack it because this is a demo. But another thing you should never do in real life is modify this by hand.
Well, you could like delete an address from there that you don't want the tool to clean up later, I suppose. But
yeah,
you probably don't want to mark an in-use address as not in use, because that's just going to break your cluster.
I think this is actually going to complain at me. Oh, no, because I'm running old code. If I use the new code, it would complain that the data store isn't locked, and it would ask me to, what is it? Data store. It would ask, God, I really can't type. It asked me to lock it, and then generate a report. So now you can see it released that address. It's found one problem. It says it's found an IP address that's in use in the cluster, but is not actually allocated by IPAM. We don't have, we don't yet have a way to auto reconcile this, but we will at least detect that it's happening.
So then the proper or the safest way to run this is to lock the data store, run the report, release the IPs in the report, and then unlock. Is that right?
That's the safest way to do it if you're planning on actually releasing addresses.
Yep. Okay.
Just because it makes sure that the report that you've generated is actually consistent with your current cluster state.
Yeah. Okay. And this works on etcd and KDD data stores, right?
Yep. There's nothing data store specific in here.
Okay. All right. Well, this is cool. I'll definitely be using it, and I'll be quiet now and let other people talk. But thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited about this, and I think there's certainly a lot more we can add to this in the future. But it's a good first building block.
Yeah.
Many thanks to Sean for getting this off the ground.
No, thanks for polishing up. That's nice.
I think
to
that's
see
all
it.
I had to
Nice
show.
to see it working with the report and stuff.
Cool. I think that brings us pretty much to the end, unless there are other questions that anybody has.
I just thought I'd mention I added the, I don't know if you said it earlier, but I added the IPAM check to the notes for 318, and I'm putting Sean and Casey as heroes for for getting that going.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, guys.
Cool. I guess I'll see y'all on on the internet.
Just
Sean.
Just going to say one thing about IPAM stuff. I think this is sort of a first phase, like making sure we have a backstop tool that you can use to clean up a leak. But I think in certain types of cluster, we've seen like leaks that sort of happen when there's just like a transient problem, like when you have a Creo cluster, for example, if it hits a snag, like the API server's down, it doesn't retry as aggressively as Kubernetes like native kubelet drivers used to retry. So we kind of relied on those like fairly aggressive retries when we originally built the CNI plugin, and then like with like Creo, it's subtly different, and it's much easier to leak an IP in those environments. So just I hope we'll be able to do something that like mops up IPs in the background and sort of garbage collects them when those inevitable problems do happen. So this tool will be a sort of backstop, but it's a good first step, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to look at Cryo more because it sounds like it is not properly implementing the spec if we're missing deletes. I know a lot of work went into the Docker shim code in Kubelet to actually get it to send us deletes for things that had received ads, which is what you expect. But yeah, Docker shim is being deprecated in the next Kubernetes release, so it'd be good to very quickly try to identify any gaps in the replacement tooling.
Yeah, and I think where we saw it the most was on clusters where we have a lot of nodes being deleted and then new nodes being added, or a node being like OS reloaded, but it keeps the same IP. So Kube thinks it's still there, but it was kind of hard shut down and then brought back up, where it might not have been time for the deletes to go through.
Yeah, those are the situations I'd expect the existing stuff to fail, because the node needs to be running in order for Docker shim to do its thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have kube controllers doing some cleanup work there. Like when a node is actually deleted and removed from the cluster, it's designed to clean up the allocations, I think, when those pods go away. But if you have one of those cases where the node, like you say, it's hard shut down, comes back, same IP, and there's a bit of leftover state, then that's a case that we can't handle there.
Yeah. And I think that reminds me, Casey, you put in the cleanup for the host endpoints, right? When node gets deleted?
Yes.
That's a Calico Hero nomination for that. That's something that's been a thorn in our side for a while, that the host endpoints stick around. So in the same case, when we're deleting and re-adding nodes, we had clusters with 500 or more host endpoints that were just sitting there that weren't causing a problem, but it was only going to be a matter of time, right, till we hit something. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for letting us know. I was pretty surprised that wasn't already there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna go have some breakfast, but it's nice seeing y'all, and I'll catch you guys next time.
See you.
Bye. Thanks. See you.